Okay, so hello everyone. We are from Group 1 and we would like to present our work on cooperation and implication. Next. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Amina, and here are our group members. Next. Okay, cooperative and implication. When people talk with each other, they try to converse smoothly and successfully. Cooperation is the basis of successful conversation. The concept and the function on cooperation and implicature are fundamentally linked. And according to Yale, 1996, the sense of cooperation is simply one in which people having a conversation are not normally assumed to be trying to confuse, trick, or withhold relevant information for each other. So basically, cooperation is the expectation that the listener has towards the speaker. The speaker is supposed to convey true statements and say nothing more than what is required. Next. And for the implicature here, according to you, implicature can be considered as an additional conveyed meaning. Implicature is attained when a speaker intends to communicate more than just what the words mean. It is the speaker who communicates something via inference, and the listener recognizes those communicated meanings via inference. And basically, implicatures are primary examples of more being communicated than is said, but for them to be interpreted, some basic operative principle must first be assumed to be in operation. For the cooperative and implicature example here, uh, in the middle of the lunch, a woman asks her friend about his lunch. Then her friend responds by, a vegetable is a vegetable. Then the woman is understand what her friend expression. The meaning of a vegetable is general meaning. However, the woman is understand the expressions of her friend. The understanding of the response expressions is implicature, while the understanding between the woman and her friend is cooperation. The woman is known and understand why her friend respond by her own expression. The next material will be explained by my friend.
So my name is Tiara Alivia Ramatika with my last digit number 132, and I'm going to explain the cooperative principle. In most circumstances, the assumption of cooperation is so pervasive that it can be stated as a cooperative principle of conversation and elaborated in four sub-principles called maxims. The cooperative principle is to make your conversational contribution, such as is required at the stage at which it occurs, by the accepted purpose or direction to the talk exchange in which you are engaged. And the maxims are quantity, quality, manner, and relation. And I will explain about quantity and quality. Quantity is to make your contribution as informative as is required for the current purpose of the exchange, and to not make your contribution more informative than is required. And for the quality, is try to make your contribution one that is true. And for the rules, to not say what you believe to be false. And the second, to not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. And the next will be explained by Tiffany.
I'm Tiffany Tiffany Azarli with my last three digits of student number is 131. So the next one is we're going to talk about the maxim of relation and also the maxim of manner. The maxim of relation where one tries to be relevant and say things that are pertinent to the discussion. Greece proposes this maxim as an explanation for a certain kind of regularity in conversational behavior with respect to the relevance of information provided at each turn of conversation. We have an example of conversation here. We can see here that B contributes what is relevant for the purpose of the conversation because the maxim is observed. If it is irrelevant, the response will be like, I like steak very much, or what nice weather. So next we have the maxim of manner here. The maxim of manner, in maxim of manner, we have to avoid ambiguity or obscurity. We should be direct and straightforward in our conversation. For example, here, we can see the conversation here, and we can conclude that B follows the maxim of manner as the sentence is unnecessarily prolix. So as things stand, there may be an overlap between the maxim of quantity and manner in terms of the length of what one says. This overlap can be explained partially, if not entirely, by thinking of the maxim of quantity, artificial as this approach may be in terms of units of information. In other words, if the listener required, say, 5 units of information from the speaker, but received less or more than the expected number, the speaker is violating the quantity maxim. The maxim is either too clear or too long-winded if in conveying them to the listener. However, the dividing line can be rather thin or unclear, and there are times when both of the maxim of quantity and quality are broken by the same factors. So the conclusion here is risk cooperative principle is a set of norms that are expected in conversation, and it consists of four maxims that have been delivered that we have to follow in order to cooperate it and understood. Next.
Okay, my name is Sakla Dewantari, and I'm going to um, talk about hedges. So the importance of the maximum of quality for cooperative interaction in English may be best measured by the number of expressions used to indicate that what we're saying may not be totally accurate. As the example in the below are not for the listener regarding the accuracy of the main statement. For example, the initial phrases, the speaker say, as far as I know, they married. I may be mistaken, but I thought I saw a wedding ring on her finger. I'm not sure if this is right, but I heard it was a secret ceremony in Hawaii. And then, for example, the final phrase, he couldn't live without her, I guess. The conversational context for the example may be a recent rumor involving a couple known to the speakers. Question notes or hedges of this type can also be used to show that the speaker is conscious of the quantity maxim, as the example in the initial phrase that produced in the course of a speaker account of a recent vacation. And the speakers say, as you probably know, I'm terrified of bugs. So to cut a long story short, we grab our stuff and run. I won't bore you with all details, but it was exciting trip. And then the next is will be presented by my friend.
So I'm gonna explain further about the hedges. Expectation of relevance from the maxim of relation can be found in the middle of the speaker talks. For example, when they say things like, well, by the way, uh, is to mention some potentially unconnected information during a conversation. Some expression may act as hedges on the expectation of relevance. For example, is the first one is the sentence, I don't know if this is important, but some of the files are missing. And the next is this may sound like a dumb question, but whose handwriting is this? And next is not to change the subject, but is this related to the budget? And the next one is the awareness of the expectation of manner may also lead speakers to produce hedges. And the example is the first one is this may be this may be a bit confused, but I remember being in a car. And second is I'm not sure if this makes sense, but the car had no light. And the third one is I don't know if this is clear at all, but I think the other car was reversing. And the next one will be explained by my friend.
All of these examples of hedges that my friends have explained are good indications that the speakers are not only aware of the maxims, but also want to show that they're trying to observe them. Maybe such form also communicate the speaker's concern that their listeners judge them as cooperative conversational partners. There are, however, some circumstances where speakers may not follow the expectations of the cooperative principle. For example, in classrooms, students are often called upon to tell their classmates and teachers things that are already well known to them. thereby violating the quantitative maxim. Another example is in courtrooms. Witnesses are in the same place as the students in my previous example. Such specialized institutional talk is clearly different from conversation. However, even in conversation, a speaker may back out of the maximum expectations by using expressions like no comment or my lips are sealed in response to a question. An interesting aspect of such expression is that although they're typically not as informative as is required in context, they are naturally interpreted as communicating more than is said. This typical reaction of listeners to any apparent violation of the maxims is actually the key to the notion of conversational implicature. Next.
Okay, so we move to the next subtopic about convert. So the implicator itself is an utterance which conveys meaning beyond its proposition, and somehow, in this case, listeners should understand and recognize the conveyed meaning through inferences in order to recognize the implicator by guessing the hidden meaning behind the spoken utterance. And in this case, the conversational implicator involves cooperative principles with its maxims. And in conclusion, the implicator happens if speaker says something violating a maxim, and therefore the example will be delivered by Dara.
Okay, thank you, Fajar. So now I'm going to giving the example of the conversational implicature. So for example, here in number 7, Dexter here is cooperating, but he's unaware of the quantity maxim. He's violating the quantity maxim, which is say enough, not less, not more, because he didn't mention the cheese. Dexter here must intend that she invert that what is not mentioned is not brought. We can also represent the structure of what was said with B as for bread and C as for C as an example number 8. Using the symbol plus and greater than for an implicator, we can also represent the additional conveyed meaning. It is important to note that it is the speaker who communicate meaning via implicatures, and it is the listener who recognize those communicated meanings via inference. Next, please.
Okay, my name is Raneta Ravindra with last digit student number 133, and I will explain about the generalized conversational implicatures. Huang 2007 states that generalized conversational implicature has a very general currency, and the utterance will have a default interpretation. In this conversation, special knowledge of the context of utterance is not required in order to make the necessary inferences. It means that understanding the hidden meaning doesn't really depend on the context and can be inferred without the requirement for specialist background knowledge. So in this conversation, the listener doesn't have knowledge of the context and utterance, but the listener still understand the content meaning. The next, my friend will be explain the example.
Okay, so my name is Panjang Miko with my last 3 student number of 115. And example of general conversation implicature is there is an example of A to B ask Mary if she invited Bella and Kathy, and Mary answered with she only invited Bella. In this example, we can identify by using the method of the previous example and use the symbol to put in that example as to B, Bella as B, and Kathy as C. It equals B and C, while Mary only Bella, which means B, not C. This means in that example, Mary didn't answer to B's questions entirely. Instead, Mary only answered one of them,
We can assume that Mary invited Kathy and only invited Bella. In this example, we can see that as reader, we don't need any special knowledge to identify this conversation. As Bella and Kathy are indefinite, we can assume and identify this example as one of the generalized conversational implicatures example. Next.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Hamka Sharial. The number is 102. So the second example of general conversation implicator is what are you able to looking at? In example RO, I was sitting in a garden one day, so a child looked over the fence. So the implicator in RO in the example is that the garden and the children mentions are calculated on the principle that if the speaker was capable of being more specific and being able to describe in a specific way, so then he or she would have said my garden and my child. So as what explained at the previous example, using the symbol is the X. It is not the speaker X. So it is I, it's not the speaker I who is look over the French. Next. So there is our presentations about the corporations and implicator. Thank you for listening. So hopefully that you're able to understanding well. Thank you, Edwin, in advance, and see you.